100 phases. Real experiences to guide and motivate. We give all our learning materials for free. If you have any opportunity to help, you can support our researches. We urgently need your help. Chapter 1. My first outer body experience. Our inboxes receive a daily flood of phase entrance testimonials at the Phase Research Center, phase school seminars around the world, and all our many language websites and forums. A small selection of them are featured in this part of the book in order to vividly demonstrate how out-of-body experience occurs in practice. Of course, mere words can hardly convey even a tenth of the emotion people experience. However, they are enough to demonstrate how important and fascinating this can be for absolutely everyone. Thousands of phase experience accounts are also freely available on the practitioner's blog sections of our forums. We start with first-time novice phase experiences presented in order of entrance method and technique. Separation immediately upon awakening. Presented here are testimonials describing first-time phase experiences archived during the first step in cycling indirect techniques, attempting to separate immediately upon awakening. Johnny Asmussen, Silkeborg, Denmark. I woke up one morning without moving or opening my eyes, and it was a very good feeling. I then thought to myself that I should do my indirect technique, but instead I said to myself, try to leave your body. I thought that I would set up on my bedside. I was lying on my back, but I had not yet moved at all, so I decided to give it my all and thought, just do it. Almost immediately, I was sitting up on my bedside. I knew that I hadn't moved at all because I never got out of my bed that fast. It happened in a blink of an eye. In my enjoyment of total freedom, I forgot my plan of action. I forgot the most important thing to do next, deepening. While sitting there, I turned my head to look at my body, just to be 120% sure that I was out of my body. Just before I had looked down at my bed, I woke up, looking at my ceiling in my real body. It was short, yet it was quick, but it was the phase. I am hooked for life. Another testimony by Alexander Durenkov from Moscow, Russia. My first entry happened at night. I was lying in bed and thinking about the phase, as I had been unable to fall asleep for a while. I dozed off for a moment and then awoke again, this time already in the proper state, and then easily rolled out, more or less unconsciously and reflexively. I went deeper by means of touching and then falling head first. It is a pity that I've already forgotten a lot of the experience, but I do remember that after deepening, I fell right down into the yard of my grandmother's house, but then lost consciousness, and so I had returned into my body and rolled out of it several times. I was unable to sharpen all my senses. When I deepened one sense, touch, for example, another, i.e. sight, would fade away. After that, I have a gap in my memory concerning my travels. Consciousness and lucidity were weak. I feel asleep and resurfaced several times, but I remember having been to a lot of places. Here's how the episode ended. I dove headfirst into the water from a high board, after first having deepened a bit, and then my sense of touch grew sharper. I felt water hit my head against a very soft bottom. I resumed the interrupted fall through willpower, but then it occurred to me that my grandmother wanted to wake me up. My level of awareness was not quite adequate, as it did not occur to me that I was actually sleeping in a dormitory, and not at all at my grandmother's house. That's why I decided that I needed to return to my body. A sharp fall occurred right after that thought, and I was followed by sensations similar to those one's experienced when hungover. Anthony Pucci. I had just had a slightly disturbed dream. I can't recall what it was now, but it left me a little shaken. I woke up, eyes still closed and completely still. Well, I'll give it a shot, I thought to myself. I tried to move my arms without using muscles. My right arm rose slightly, and I have had some experiences in the past that helped me remember the tingling sensation present during separation. Holy cow, it's finally happening. I was still a little doubtful when it comes time to get up, but I tried nevertheless, and that electric shock sort of feeling coursed through me after total separation. I did it, I said aloud. I can go see her now. Who is she? Is may be explained later if I feel up to it, but for now, I will call her Mia. Since she is relevant and that name is easier for me to type, I rage my composure and recalled that I had to deepen and do so. I did. I felt the walls, the bedposts, and my clothes. I was wearing a very long shirt down past my waist and some boxer briefs instead of what I had gone to sleep in. When I finally got my visions to return, everything seemed larger than it should have been, and I felt slightly anxious, sort of like that paranoia you feel after watching a scary movie. Regardless, I pushed through it. I went to my door. Mia's behind this door, I thought to myself. If it didn't lead anywhere unusual, just out into my hall. Again, things were a little larger than they should have been, and a few places were covered in a very dim greenish light. I called her name, beckoning, Mia. My voice was quiet and shaken. I couldn't seem to regain my composure for some reason. I continued calling her name and asked, Where are you? I heard her voice in my head responding, Huh? I'm right here. I went down the hall in a half panic, checking various places in the house for her. Everywhere I went was extra large, dimly lit, and green. Where is here? I cried. Her voice answered to me again, the usual place. I was getting frustrated now. I wanted to see Mia badly, asking, Where is the usual place? I retraced my steps. Maybe she was behind me. Fortunately, that's where my story ends because I returned to my body soon afterwards. I tried to leave it again, but I couldn't budge. The residual doubt and fear in my mind may have held me back. I know I made a few mistakes in my techniques, namely not being 100% convinced that my door would lead me to Mia and not maintaining. Svyatoslav Baranov from Perm, Russia. I woke up on my side. I didn't feel like sleeping anymore, but I closed my eyes anyway. When I lay down on my back, I immediately felt the sensation that I was about to fall from the couch. I was lying on the edge. Some kind of lapse occurred, as if I was being pulled somewhere. I lay down once again, and this buzzing started, and a green light appeared before my eyes. I lay back even further, and my eyelids started to flutter. I thought that I might fall from the couch at that moment, but then my vision came to me, and I observed that I was already lying on the floor next to the couch. I got up on my feet and noticed that the room was spinning as if I was drunk, but everything quite quickly went back to normal. At that very moment, I understood what that was, the phase itself, without deepening. An ecstasy. I forgot about all the techniques and went to look about the room. Everything was just like in reality, but some things were all out of place. I tried to levitate and bent backwards and was somehow thrust outside. It was dusk out there and there was a lot of snow on the ground. I went around the house and tried to levitate. I was able to soar upwards. I saw the horizon of the sunset, but then I began to lose altitude. After having flown to the window on the other side of the house, I wanted to go up to the roof, but then a foul occurred. No maintaining. In a fraction of a second, I had the sensation that I was nowhere, but then my real eyes opened with difficulty, and there was once again the feeling of some sort of lapse. No re-entering. Awareness was dim during this phase, apparently due to not having gotten enough sleep. Employing the indirect techniques. If separation upon awakening is unsuccessful or for some reason no such attempt is even made, then quick alternative through techniques is employed. Separation may be attempted once one of the alternated techniques starts working. Daud Slotsworthy in Ventura, United States of America. I went to bed at about 10 p.m. I woke up at about 5:30. Used the bathroom, went back to bed. It took me a while to fall asleep. Once I did, I woke up a couple of times and changed positions each time. I felt vibrations come on, and I heard people talking as they came in my house. I also heard little footsteps near my bed and thought it may be one of my little kids. Luckily, I remember that this type of phenomenon happens when entering the phase. I stayed still and strained the brain to increase the vibrations. This worked really well. I then used phantom wiggling and got my left arm out. At that point, I tried to separate by rolling out, but with no success. I then got to my right arm, but I thought I had actually moved my real arm. I was worried I had blown the whole thing, but decided to continue anyway. I tried to see both arms in front of me. They quickly appeared, and I saw them through closed eyes. I started swinging my arms from side to side and rolled out of my body. I was now on the floor next to my bed. I was so excited. I had just done what I had been reading about for 10 months. I remembered to stabilize the experience by rubbing my hands together. As I was doing this, I looked down and noticed my hands looked flat and swollen. I then saw my wife leave the bedroom and go downstairs. No plan of action. I followed her and noticed the sun shining in through the windows. It was still dark in real life. My wife then went back upstairs, so I decided to go outside. I started for the front door, but decided to fly through the window. I landed in the street and walked out for a bit. I started to go up to my neighbor's house, but noticed that everything was fading. I had lost the experience, and I was now back in my room. I had quickly spun around in my mind and noticed myself right back in the same spot I had left. I walked up to my neighbor's door, rang the doorbell, and waited for her to come. I then lost it again and tried spinning, but it did not work. Maxim Shvets from Moscow, Russia. I went to bed with the intention of entering the phase while dreaming or upon awakening in the morning. I woke up at about 6:30 a.m. and decided to try the method of visualization, as phantom wiggling had not worked over the past 2 days. Vague images gradually created a scene in front of me, which I then found myself participating in. I felt myself separating from my body and rolled out of it. I opened my eyes. Some guy grabbed me by the shoulder and said, "You've left your body. Be cool." I told him that I was ready. He turned me around and I saw my body. My body was lying on its back with its open eyes, even though I had started visualizing while lying on my stomach. Not assigning any particular significance to this, I decided to deepen right away. I squatted down and began to quickly palpate the floor and the walls with the palms of my hands. I then looked at my index finger and could discern the lines in the skin. Figuring that this was all wonderful, I went to the kitchen in order to fly. However, I remembered that it was best for novices not to attempt this. A sunny beach behind me, I opened the door and immediately woke up lying in my bed. Alan from Plymouth, UK. I woke up, no separation, and immediately applied phantom wiggling on my left arm for 5 seconds, and my arm began moving freely, no separation. I could at this point have had an OBE, but I wanted a lucid dream. Wrong logic. After 5 seconds of phantom wiggling, I switched to 5 seconds of listening, which is the wrong action. After about 2 seconds of listening into the high-pitched natural sounds inside my head, it started to increase in my volume. No separation. After 5 seconds, I still hadn't entered a dream, so I switched to 5 seconds of observing images. I didn't see anything, so I switched to straining the brain. Immediately, the high-pitched sound in my head became very loud, and so I immediately switched to listening in again. I saw a purple pool of water and felt that its clarity was very good, and then I found myself fully immersed in a lucid dream. I was in a deep, beautiful valley with lambs frolicking about. I looked about and marveled at the ability to be able to have a lucid dream in a matter of seconds. I enjoyed my lucid dream without deepening. Artem Arakshev, Moscow, Russia. I did indirect techniques while peering at images. I caught sight of the same dream episode that I had been watching until I first woke up. The picture was very realistic. It seemed to me that I could change everything in this dream. I tried to get out of my body and immediately flew through my head right into the dream. I landed at the door of the home that I grew up in. I then found myself at a window on the second floor. Having remembered about the deepening techniques, I quickly began to scrutinize the window itself. My attention then shifted, and I peered out through the window. Everything was in its place like in real life. Some man approached the door. I don't know why, but I was sure that I needed to watch what he was up to. I instinctively took off from the second floor window, going right through the glass, and I lowered to the level of the ground floor. The man walked in through the front door. I followed him, flew in through the door, and began to pursue him. I then remembered that I had a plan for this phase. At precisely that moment, the phase space began to fade and disappear. I realized that I should apply the maintaining technique, but not managed to do so in time. Within a moment, I woke up to myself lying in bed. My body temperature went up. My breathing and heart rate became more frequent. A second attempt to separate was of no use. Wagner, Porto Alegre, Brazil. I was awoken by my cat. Ended up accidentally employing the deferred method since I have slept some hours before this OBE. And then I did forced falling asleep, then cycled rotation, observing images, listening in, phantom wiggling, etc. I can't remember which one led to vibrations. I amplified the vibrations once I felt them. They were an unknown sensation to me until then, but I couldn't remember what I was supposed to do then. To wait for sleep paralysis or to separate. Then I decided to do just anything and try to separate by floating upwards, as if me and my body had the same magnetic charge and would repel each other, because I've ruined some attempts before by trying to roll out and moving my actual body. It worked to a point. I felt as if I was floating about 1 foot high. Meanwhile, my plan was to separate, turn around, see my body, and think, whoa, man. Then I would start rubbing my hands, palpitating, peering, and do a list of things while maintaining. But instead, I floated without seeing anything. I just felt the thrust pushing me up, which took about half a second or less without sight. I simply was in a place that I hadn't consciously chosen, and I kind of forgot that I could make decisions. At that point, I started watching things passively. Earlier, I had remembered all the techniques that I should employ, but at the moment, it slipped my mind. I went to a place where somehow I knew only musicians went to in order to find other musicians and play along with them. It had a great positive vibe to it. I then heard voices of people talking around. There was a female voice, and this girl walked from the right to the left behind me, but somehow I saw all her star shoes. She was commenting about what a cool and friendly place it was. There was a guy with a black trench coat and shaved head playing something between a piston and a trombone. It was deep dark blue, and he played it with one hand and a guitar with the other, producing awesome music. The piston's keys were actually chromed Fender type elephant ear bass turners. He didn't put his mouth on the thing at any moment and played it pointing it towards his foot the whole time. The guitar was suspended out in front of him by a strap on his left side with his neck pointing upwards. It sometimes sounded like a piano. There were no amplifiers, pedals, or cables at all. When I felt he was about to finish his music, I wanted to applaud him and tell him what it was awesome, but he disappeared, so I didn't know where. It was a strange. There was strange. This was strange because it was as if the music was still sounding, and I wouldn't dare open my mouth while he was still playing. It was beautiful. Then a man about 60 years old, who was dressed somewhat like a sailor, at least that was what I thought, approached another guy who was playing some unknown instrument, resting the thing on his left shoulder like a violin. I think it was not an actual instrument, but rather something like a sewing machine or something anaeric in a natural like way. The sailor stopped by the side of this sewing machine man, and from inside of a worn out black cheap looking plastic bag for which most people wouldn't give a penny, neither would I, pulled a barbed edged transparent acrylic plate which looked as if it was sawn off of a jigsaw, as if it was randomly cut plate which had fallen off while the actual plate, whatever it could be, was being made. The plate was about 1 foot by 1 foot by 4 inches and was not exactly rectangular. I never supposed that thing would play music. Actually, when he played perfectly accompanying the sewing machine guy, I asked myself, what will he be playing with? I lurched forward and opened my mouth in complete surprise. It was a flexing instrument, and I never thought of this obvious concept before and probably wouldn't have without that experience. Everyone knows the bass, pook, or wook sound that an x-ray plate or some large plate like that, even made of different materials, makes when flexed, and most people knew the high-pitched squeak sound of tiny steel lids about 2 inches in diameter that come in small cans of several types. The noise they make when folded in and out, well, when the sailor held the plate with the tips of his fingers near the edge of the plate, the folding area was wider and so the sound was bassier. When he held it with his 4 fingertips close to the center, the folding area was smaller and so the sound was higher pitched. He could get his hands close or farther as fast as choosing notes on any other instrument and could play along with every note of the sewing machine man. It was impressive. I don't remember how this phase ended. Hints from the mind. During some awakenings, the mind sends hints in from various sensations that can easily be entered into the phase. You need only intensify those sensations and separate from the body. Such hints usually consist of images, sleep stutters, stupors, vibrations, noise, dream figments, and real or false numbness. Ivan Yakovlev from Antwerp, Belgium. I don't know what woke me up, but I knew right away that something was out of order. I could not open my eyes. My body was almost just asking to rise up. I understood what was going on. All of this indicated that I was having an out-of-body experience. The first thing I tried was to lift my hand, and it worked. I understood that this was an astral hand because I could see through it. I moved hastily and carefully to the other side of the bed. There was a strange sensation in my head at that time. I calmed down and tried to do something again. I levitated about half a meter above the bed. Vision came back to me right then, and I saw that appeared to be my room, but not exactly it, as the rug on the floor was different color pattern and the door was closed for some reason. I could not comprehend why everything was lit from behind my back. Then I looked over my shoulder. I saw a small, bright, white ball behind my shoulder blade at a distance of 8 inches. It was lighting up the room. Then I tried to go through the door, but was unable to. Out of the fear that I would never return to my real body, I woke up in the everyday world. Natalia Korzenova from Shlekovo, Russia. When I was about 17 or 18 years old, I read some esoteric articles on astral projection. They seemed quite interesting to me, but no more than a curiosity. I did not particularly believe in such things. One evening, I went to bed as usual. I woke up in the middle of the night, but was unable to move my body. There was loud noises in my head. Having been reminded of those articles, I simply tried to levitate. I managed to do so as if through my forehead somehow. The sensation of flying was very realistic. To my great surprise, the first thought that occurred to me was, wow, these astral guys weren't lying. I hovered above my body for some time in the dark. I thought a vision and it started to appear. I then flew towards the window, and upon turning around in to face my body, I saw it in its proper place. I decided to fly back to it and touch it. When I finally poked it, it sucked my back into it, causing a quite strange sensation. Okay, Alexander Furmankov from St. Petersburg, Russia. I woke up early in the night after some difficulties with falling asleep. Blurred images started to float before my eyes, and I realized that I could enter the phase. I started to discard unnecessary images, and after getting a hold of one of them, I emerged in some kind of yellow corridor. The level of general realness and awareness of the experience was about 80 to 90% of that of reality. I remember about the methods for deepening, which is why I started to look at everything going on around me. But this did not yield any serious results. I started to touch myself, but all the sensations seemed to somewhat dampened. I realized that I was losing awareness. I came around, but nevertheless fell asleep in about 20 seconds. Becoming conscious while dreaming. If you become aware that everything around you is but a dream while you are in one, then everything from that moment on is already the phase. All that remains is to make it a full phase experience by enhancing your sensations and carrying out your plan of action. Valdis, Lithuania. I was sitting on a bench just thinking and doing nothing, but suddenly a woman showed up and said to me, "Maybe you were dreaming." I was in shock. It struck me like lightning. Oh my god, I am in the phase. A plan. I had a plan. What should I do next? Since I've been finished reading Michael's book, I know all about deepening and maintaining, so I touched everything around me, looked closely at my hands, and rubbed them. My vision and other senses got stronger, so I moved on to my plan. I wanted to try flying, walking, teleporting, diving into the ground, and jumping through walls. First of all, I tried flying. I jumped up as high as I could and then floated down. I jumped again and started flying. I felt the wind and the sun. I could see far into the distance. When my vision got blurry, I decided to teleport into my room and do some maintaining and deepening. In my room, I found that some woman, and she told me, try going through walls. I touched the wall and was a little bit afraid. After forgetting my fear, I started running towards another wall and jumped through it. The feeling was amazing. The woman advised me again, try diving into the ground, but don't forget to imagine where you want to end up. I walked into the middle of my room and started falling down. I closed my eyes, and imaged a beautiful rice field. It felt like I was falling forever, and then boom, I was falling down from a very high height. I was falling towards a huge table full of delicious dishes, which I had rice as the main ingredient. I started laughing and thought, wow, my subconscious played a hell of a joke on me. That's when I woke up. Sigura Risita, Romania. I don't think that I needed to realize that I was dreaming because as soon as I fell asleep, I became lucid. I couldn't see anything but the screen of an iPhone, and I knew I had to choose the place I wanted to be in. I chose a weird place that I had never seen before, and then I saw a white door. I opened the door, wondering where it would bring to me. I got in a weird room, and there was a lot of skeletons on the floor, so I freaked out and then teleported somewhere else. I remember having been in many other places when I woke up next to my bed. I wasn't sure what had actually happened. I thought it was just still a lucid dream. I was next to my bed and could see almost everything in my room, even turned out to TV. But I couldn't bring myself to look in my bed's direction. I didn't want to do that at all. After a while, I started to feel my breath. I was scared because I was breathing too slowly, and I thought I was going to die if I didn't start breathing faster, which is the wrong logic. I wanted to wake up, but each time I tried, I got back into my body, but only for a second in SP, and then again next to my bed. I had tried to wake up about 7 times before I finally woke up. Wrong action. I was scared but almost amazed at what happened to me. However, I could consider myself lucky because I hadn't experienced sleep paralysis before and I knew how to get out of it. After the experience, I didn't even bother trying lucid dreaming again. I got all interested in outer body experiences. Roman, from Rostov on Don, Russia. My first time entering the phase, I dreamt that I was hurrying somewhere and constantly thinking about something. At a certain wonderful moment, it hit upon me the idea that I was dreaming and decided to try to exit, which is the wrong action. There is no deepening. I lay on the ground and began to exit, imagining how I was separating from the body. During the transition, I nearly was thrown out of the phase due to the tension and fear. I was nonetheless successful. I saw myself at a doorway after having crawled through a wall. It was like coming out of a dog. This, the sensation of separating was very vivid. I suddenly noticed a person here. There, I mean. He helped me get to completely out. No plan of action. He introduced himself and started telling me some particulars about the world that I had landed in. I don't recall well what he said as I was looking around the whole time and couldn't tear my eyes off my surroundings. I was spellbound. In the end, I became worried about my body and decided that it was time to return back. Returning was like a nightmare. There were voices, sounds, and strange sensations. I had a feeling that time I stood still. I was so happy upon waking up that I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. Josh from Australia. One night I was dreaming of traveling in a car with a friend and thought she was driving away too fast, and then I got bizarre rushing sensations that enveloped my entire physical body. It felt like I was being turned inside out. The sensation stopped, and then I was fully awake and completely aware, and I opened my eyes. It was in my bedroom, lying on my back, and my body had a blue hue or tint to it. No separation and deepening. I felt my arms panicked. I asked to go back to my bed, and then, with a slight tingling, I opened my eyes for real, which is the wrong action, and I was actually lying on my side facing my partner. Then I knew the experience was real. Alexei Bakharev from Sochi, Russia. This was the first time that I managed to become conscious while dreaming. Before falling asleep, I concentrated on the darkness before my eyes and tried to remain consciousness as long as I could. All of a sudden, I dreamt that I was levitating to the ceiling, which resulted in my becoming consciousness and I was dreaming. My phantom body responded poorly to attempts to control it and simply hovered beneath the ceiling, no deepening. There were two people sitting on the floor below. They were looking in my direction, but it seemed that they did not see me. No plan of action and maintaining. At this point, I woke up and felt some sort of tingling and itching in my leg, and there was no re-entering. Direct exit from body without prior sleep. Direct entrance to the phase without prior sleep or after a period of full awareness is achieved by bringing about shallow dips of conscious awareness. All that remains is to separate from the body on the way back from such a dip. Phil B., New York, Russia. I woke up at 6 a.m. today, went to the bathroom, and then lay back down immediately to try to fall asleep. I usually have difficulty falling asleep, so this time, for the first time, I put in earplugs and wore a face mask. After about an hour, I was still quite awake and running through the ideas for my class in my head. After an hour, I wasn't falling asleep yet, but I was very relaxed physically, and so I tried forced falling asleep. After about 10 to 15 seconds, I felt a strange dislocation and numbness settle all over my body. No separation, which felt unusual. I immediately tried listening in and heard a very loud ringing sound like fire alarms going off. I listened to it, and it got louder and then seemed to peak. It was very loud, no separation, but nothing else was happening, and so I switched to observing images for a few seconds. Still nothing. The ringing got even quieter, so I went back to listening in. I got louder again, and again. It seemed to peak. Then I realized that it was so loud that I was probably already in the phase, but didn't realize it. I tried rolling over with a sudden jerk, and bam! I was out of the bed, standing on the floor. I can't describe how unexpected this was. I had no idea what rolling out would feel like, and it turned out to be kind of like climbing out of a pool, about that much resistance. Michael's advice to not worry and just do it was right on the money. I was very excited, but I remembered the SOBT advice to immediately deepen. Everything was gray, and I felt nothing, heard nothing, saw only gray silhouettes around me. I started rubbing my hands together firmly in front of my face, and they slowly came into view. Along with everything else in my room, I started peering at my hands and fingers. My vision became crystal clear. My room came into perfect, lifelike focus. I walked around my room, peering and palpitating everything I could find. Since it was my first time in the phase, I examined all of the random objects lying around on my shelves and tables. They all appeared perfectly real, even the writing on them. I didn't stop to try to read the individual writings, however, because I didn't want to foul. I continuously reminded myself that I was phasing, so as not to lose consciousness and fall asleep. No plan of action. After reading about a minute, looking at everything and being amazed, after spending about a minute looking at everything and being amazed by the simulacrum of reality, I decided to try to do something with the experience. I didn't have any plans beforehand because I was not really expecting success, but I decided on the spur of the moment to try flying. I looked up at my ceiling, then down at my feet, took a deep breath, and tried to levitate while looking at my feet. They slowly rose a few inches off the floor. As I exhaled, they went back down, perfectly controlled as I expected. I tried again with another deep breath, and this time a jump, and I launched myself through my ceiling like Superman, fists extended. I wanted to blast out, and I did, through about 10 floors of brick and plaster, which exploded in front of me like a monastery pratfall in reverse. What a descriptive one. And then I was out above my house. I was not in my neighborhood, but in some kind of huge cave that hounded at an entire city. I didn't recognize anything. I didn't have any plans or where to go. So I just flew around a little bit and eventually zoomed in on the window where some of my friends of mine, I don't know who it was, they were just labeled friends in my dream consciousness, was watching a movie on the television. At this point, since I didn't have anything to do, I was just hovering outside the window with a pause in my actions. I fouled and woke up in my bed. I hadn't moved, and I wanted to immediately try to enter the phase again, but I was just too excited, and I felt my physical body, very clearly. I decided to get up and record my experience, and when I stood up, it confirmed that I was completely awake and not the least groggy or relaxed, since I was able to turn on my computer and write clearly and lucidly right away. Anna from Barnaul, Russia. I was in my bed imagining that I was leaving my body, and soon I felt that I was pulled by someone out of my body. I decided not to resist it, though the vibration was very strong and frightened me a little bit. In less than no time, I found myself standing on the floor out of my body. The room was luminous with sunlight. I felt free and extremely happy, as if I got rid of something unnecessary which always troubled me. My new body had no legs, but there was no need in them. No deepening. I had thought that it was necessary to bring something from the other room, as the fact confirming that I was in astral, wrong logic, and no plan of action. I flounced out of the room, seized a bag, and brought it to my bedroom. In the morning, the bag was in its former place again. Then I watched something strange. My new bed and room existed simultaneously with my old bed and room. Everything had mixed up, and I hastened to return to my body. I saw my body lying in the bed and became suddenly very upset. I thought, how such a young soul can return to such an old body? Then I felt a pity to myself, and I tried to join my body. Wrong action, but did not manage it. Fear overwhelmed me, and once I recollected that I had read somewhere that one should make a turnabout to join his body. I did so and found myself in my physical body. John Merritt from Houston, Russia. A friend of mine found a practical guidebook on the net and sent me the link. I read the book and soon it finally happened. I went to sleep at around 10 or 11 and woke up at 4. I stayed up for 30 minutes and lay back down. I started meditating and then going over the techniques and separating my mind. I fell into a free-floating state, going out of consciousness. I started observing images. Soon vibrations started. I already experienced vibrations once or twice. First time I felt them, I was scared, and they went away after a few seconds. First time I tried to intensify them, it seemed to work for a few seconds, but then again, nothing. This time I used straining in the brain. The vibrations got stronger and stronger. At this time I didn't lose them. They intensified and came to a crescendo. And when they were over, I felt different. My next thought was I was already separated from my body. All I had to do was just stand up and I was alright. I rose up out of my body and sat up and stepped off the bed and I was out. I couldn't really plan what I would do. No deeping and no plan of action. The room was dark and my first thought was to turn on a light. I was in my bedroom, so I walked in the bathroom, and in my bedroom, flipped the light switch on, nothing. I vaguely thought to myself, maybe the light is burned out. So I walked out into the hallway and to the other upstairs bathroom and turned on the light switch there. Again, nothing. But I remember then from reading lucid dreaming books that light switches don't work in dreams. And since I was in my astral body, turning on the light switch wasn't going to work either. I decided to go back to my bed and look at myself. I ran to the room, saw my bed, and literally jumped on the fucking floorboard and looked. There I was, or there my body was, and it was the most incredible feeling I ever experienced in my life. I was outside my body and knew it. I was wide awake, fully conscious, with all essence, memories, all of me. Question mark. But there it was, asleep on the bed, my physical body. Even saw one of my arms jerk a little bit. After that, I felt the need to verify that it had just happened and see if I could remember it soon. I was back on my body and wide awake. No re-entering. And it was true. If it had really happened, at least I had done it and it was real and I remembered every second of it. Artem Mingazov from Ulankovsk, Russia. I lay on the couch and tried to directly exit. Everything was going along and well in my consciousness suddenly checked out for a moment. When I returned, I realized that I was lying on my bed and felt a phantom body. I tried rolling out to the side, which worked, albeit with some difficulty. Here I began to palpitate the bed and myself. I did everything a bit hurriedly. I couldn't see yet. I decided that I could deepen in love and dove head first into the floor, that is, more excitedly into the void. I flew down a little bit and found myself in my neighbor's apartment below. I then flew back up to my own apartment and still on the floor, trying to restore vision. I opened my eyes. Felt like trying to open the eyes after a long period of sleep deprivation. My eyelids were heavy and yielded and grudgingly. I looked around and I was standing in my room and it was sunny outside. I decided to try to fly. Well, I love flying. No plan of action. I was able to fly up to the ceiling, but immediately began to gently fall back down. Being pulled backwards upon touching down on the floor, I bounced back up. This was comparable to when a balloon falls and hits the floor. Springs back up, falls again, then bounces up again. I was only able to remain standing on the floor after repeating this process several times. Suddenly, it became difficult to breathe. I tried to go back down to my body, wrong direction, but was somehow unable to. At first, panic arose, but when I realized that giving in to the fear would do me no good and that I would have nothing to stick it out, but as soon as I calmed down and relaxed, calmed down, I had a foul, no re-entering. All the above sensations lasted for about a minute. Matthias Holzer from Vienna, Austria. March 11, 2001. This is my first OBE. There were experiences with the vibrational state before, but I didn't have the guts to go through it since at the time. I believed the essential soul would leave the body, which could be dangerous. Nevertheless, this time I decided to do it for real. I was 20 years old at the time. I woke at 5 o'clock in the morning, but felt very tired. I knew that I'd fall asleep again as soon as I lay down. As soon as I relaxed, the vibration state set in. My body felt paralyzed like it was falling asleep. I heard the roaring noise I already knew. The state seemed to be not very deep because as soon as I tried to move, I moved the physical body and awoke. However, I immediately started a second attempt, which worked. Waited a little bit longer this time. Suddenly, my body perception changed, and then I just carefully moved like I would get out of my physical body. Next moment, I was standing up and knew I was out of my body. I couldn't see very well, only a bit. No deepening and no plan of action. I was curious if the silver cord I had read about really existed. Wrong logic. I felt for it, and true enough, there it was, extended out from my astral back. I tried to look at my physical body at the bed, but I couldn't see it. Then I tried to look at myself, my astral body, and could see my left hand shimmering in a light purple color. At this point, I decided to end the experience and go back into the bed in order to work at the first, but there was no fear. My consciousness faded into a dream, and I awoke about an hour later with rested and very satisfied. Oleg Kodrin from Moscow, Russia. I woke up. It was still dark. I answered nature's call and looked at my watch, 4:15 a.m. I got into bed, lay on my left side, closed my eyes, and it felt like something was shining into my eyes. I realized that was impossible. It was 4:15 a.m. and I was the only one awake. There was no one else in the room besides my wife. Meanwhile, the light steadily intensified. I experienced some light fear mixed together with curiosity. What would happen next? And then the light became brighter and brighter. I felt I was in danger. There was no separation. But at the same time, an instinct to investigate took the upper hand. I knew that something unusual was happening, but knew that all that was impossible. A bright light of an unknown nature piercing my eyes through closed eyelids. Then the idea occurred on its own that they were coming to check on me, and after that, I'll go all the way. The next moment, I found myself in a small rectangular room with a subdued light. There were ledges along the wall that you could sit on. I figured there were benches. One wall had round portholes of about 3 feet wide. I looked through them and realized that I was in deep outer space. Jesus. No deepening, no plan of action. There was an impressive construction outside the room that I was in. What I saw there could not exist in even the most fantastic environments on Earth. It was a lattice construction, but the elements had no logical structure and gave the appearance of a beehive. It seemed to be a dual tube construction of such colossal proportions that the diameter of only one of those tubes could be compared to the diameter of a stadium. Bustling and scurrying around the structure were small spacecraft, which appeared to be doing some kind of work. "It's a docking portal," sounded the answer in my head. I turned around. In the far corner of my room sat a beautiful young woman, dreamed completely in earthling fashion, wearing a skirt and jacket. Strange as it may be, she looked like a famous pop singer, although the similarity was incomplete. This woman was much more interesting than the artist. I shall formulate the one question dogging me at the time as follows: what is the emptiness that the Buddhist masters speak of? I framed that question to the good looking person in the room with me. For some reason, I didn't come up with the idea of doing something else besides. I'm married, but my question was heard and the answer followed. What I then experienced has no parallels in everyday life. However, those feelings cannot be expressed in words. Human language simply lacks the ability to communicate such concepts, but I'll try. It was as if I was turned inside out. Everything outside of me turned out to be inside of me, including the stars, the galaxies, the other worlds, in short. The entire material universe in this all was collapsed to such small proportions that it all could have fit into the eye of a needle. And I, being outside the material universe, was looking at it simultaneously from all sides. Even though I did not have hundreds of millions of eyes, I was one large field encompassing the space around this compressed universe, and able to take it all in at once visually. I myself was endless. I had no boundaries in space or time. All around was stillness, and I myself was still stillness. Contemplating this universe brought the realization that through effort I could turn into nothingness. Next thought, but then there would be nothing to do the contemplating. Then I became like a funnel collecting from the parameters of my universe, whirling inside it, pulling all in deeper and deeper until I lay on the bed as I did, as I had been after having answered nature's call. No re-entering. This vision moved me so much that I already couldn't sleep. I just wanted to run outside and jump for joy and delight. I wanted to tell everyone about my experience and simply share it, but I realized I'd be taken for a schizophrenic, and that's more or less how I lived from that point on, often recalling that vivid experience and treasuring it in the depths of my soul. I dreamt nearly every day about having a similar experience again until I discovered the indirect techniques. Roman Rautov, Samaria, Russia. Truly, the most interesting things almost always happen unexpectedly. After a sufficiently long break in my attempts to go to the other world, tonight I decided to try it again. I threw my towel after yet another unsuccessful attempt, rolled to my other side, and decided to simply go and get a good night's sleep. I did not know exactly how much time passed while I lay down and thought about what I was still doing wrong while observing interesting images that my imagination was drawing, but at one fine moment I suddenly felt the phenomenon that is commonly referred to as vibrations. I started to intensify them. I should add that the feeling is undescribable, but I could not levitate, though I really wanted to take a look at myself from the outside. I decided to simply take a l- I decided to simply stand up, and that's when it all became most interesting. The entire process of transitioning from a horizontal position to a vertical one was accompanied by increasingly palpable vibrations and a louder and louder roaring sound in my head. The sensation was the same as that experience after going to bed after not having slept for 24 hours and being suddenly aroused by somebody. My head spun, everything started crackling inside of it, and I was about to lose consciousness. Then a flickering picture started to appear. It stabilized after 1 or 2 seconds, and the roaring in my head died down, and I realized that I was sitting on my bed. I was in the apartment, though it was noticeably altered. My room seemed more or less the same, though the interior was indeed different upon detailed examination. For example, my mobile phone, which is always within reach, was somehow an older and different model. It turned out to be the first object that I tested, as I suddenly wanted very much to find out what time it was and check which day of the month it was. No plan of action. I distinctly felt the phone in my hand, but upon attempting to concentrate on and look at the display, I was thrown back into the reality. I immediately climbed back out of my body and decided to simply pace around the apartment while trying to remember what I could experiment on. Tried to figure out objects, conjure objects, but that didn't work and resulted in some mental activity. This caused the phase to fade and me being thrown back into reality. In total, there were about 5 successive entries into the phase that lasted for 2 to 3 minutes each. The experience were not stable at all, which is why I was examining my surroundings in a hurry, always trying to get a hold of anything I could get my hands on. However, there were a good amount of impressions considering that it was my first entry. Spontaneous experiences. Sometimes a person does nothing to reach the phase or even knows nothing about it, but it nonetheless occurs spontaneously for him. This usually happens during the relaxation, slumber, awakening, a dream episode, or the like, or it could be purely random. Analysis of mistakes in these accounts have been kept to a minimum in consideration of the fact that the authors lack prior knowledge regarding the phase. Jamie Munoz Lenquist from Orange County, USA. My first out of body experience was very dramatic. I fell asleep around 4 to 5 a.m. I fell asleep at around 4 to 5 a.m. I experienced a sensation all over my body. I was in a meditative state of sleep, but at the same time, I was aware of what was going on with me. I had the feeling of tingling sensations all over my body, followed by the paralysis. Suddenly, I found myself levitating from the bed and wound up in a standing position. I got very scared and started praying, asking the Lord to protect me. Then I got back into my body and quick like a flash. When I woke up, I had the feeling like I needed to understand what just happened to me. I did some research and I was told that you can travel places and go to the moon, so I couldn't wait to try again. The day I was feeling so good with myself, I felt I have discovered something new and exciting. Oksana Raybova from Moscow, Russia. I seemed it seemed to me that my deep morning slumber had been interrupted by the discomfort and mild pain of numbness in my left arm, which my head had been lying on while I was asleep. The desire arose within me to get rid of that discomfort. I moved my numb arm in front of me and opened my eyes, but I couldn't see the physical arm in front of me, even though I clearly felt it and could curl and uncurl my 5 fingers, bend the arm at the elbow. This all made me somewhat confused. I clearly understood that something like this could not happen in the normal physical world. I decided that this was a very realistic dream and that in order to wake up, I would simply need to close my eyes and strain my brain with the desire to wake up. That thought was followed by action. I opened my eyes shortly thereafter, thinking that I had finally woken up. Before me was the daily reality that I always observe upon awakening. A large window through which sunlight poured out into my bed to the center of the room, a desk, a chair, a bookcase of academic literature, and a wardrobe with nothing in it. Just like always, I decided to spend this weekday off. I had lots of days off that week, getting calm, easy rest. I sat up Indian style in bed with my elbows on my knees. I squinted, enjoyed the rays of May's sun messaging my face. It was warm and the air was fresh, and I felt a sweet sense of peace pouring through my body. Like a sort unearthly sweet nectar, I turned to look around, and suddenly that 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 state of relaxation abruptly changed into cold and shivering. The sense of peace transformed into terrible fear. My body of me that I could feel but not see, they were like my body was lying behind me. Panic, I glanced at those hands in front of me that I could feel but not see. They were lying peacefully in the bed alongside my body. I touched them, felt their velvety skin, yet no feeling in the cessation with my physical hands. I tried to return to my body. Was still lying there. Fear overwhelmed me tremendously. I was in tears, perplexity, incomprehension, the question, what next? And all around me was that bright and sunny day. I became more and more afraid. The desire to leave that state grew exponentially. All of my attempts to return to my body brought no result. Frightened and ultimately scared, I sat on the bed like a figurine. Suddenly, out of the silence, I heard steps in the room, but I couldn't see anybody. The fear grew wandering in my room, bidding him to stay away from me. I then asked the question, who is he? What does he want here? Why can't I see him? I got an answer. Don't be afraid. This is all normal. He appeared a moment later, standing beside my bed. He was about 6 feet tall and a little over 30 years old, with a stocky, muscular figure. His hair was dirty blonde and cut short. His eyes were gray-blue. He was wearing only a black bathing suit. Around his neck was a thick gold chain. He began to explain something to me about a certain city, calling it a transfer point. Then he said that many go through such a state and that it was a normal thing. He took my hand and said, "Let's go." A moment later, we found ourselves in some sort of old town street. The house was stood in front of had a blue rectangle on its corner with the name of the street and the house number. I was easily able to read everything and was surprised at what I saw. We stood almost naked in the middle of the street, but presumably paid us, but passerbys paid us no attention. I realized that they didn't see us. They didn't stop looking around, shocked and scared, but what was happening? My head was filled with what was at the time a terrible question: how to return. The young man abruptly ran towards the corner of the house in front of us, entering through its walls. He said that it was time for him to return, as his friend was due to arrive. He disappeared. I stood in the same place for some time, watching people pass me by. I didn't know how to get back to my room because the place from which we entered the street turned into be a wall. What a bad break. How was I going to go through the wall? I closed my eyes, thought about my room, and recited, "Whatever will be, will be." Stepped forward and found myself in my bed. Sweeping my eyes over the room, I discovered that nothing had changed in it. The sun shone into just as it had before. Breathing as a sigh of relief and closing my eyes in the great hope that I would wake up, I rushed to open them, but to my horror, instead I found a table with medical instruments on my bed. Waves of fear swept over my body with a renewed intensity. I gulped that I would not make it through if they put me under the knife. I closed my eyes once again and started to pray. The fear gradually receded. I calmed down and finally woke up. The first thing I did was to make sure that the table with the medical instruments was not there. I jumped up and started knocking on the dresser and the wall and on the window in order to make sure that it was all over. Andres Sanchez, the Andres Sanchez at gmail.com. I was in my bed. I noticed two plastic objects in my right hand. I thought it was weird for them to be there, so I got up and threw them on the floor. The first one did not make any kind of sound. The second did, likely because I started expecting it after noticing that the first one didn't. I thought it was odd, so I went to the light switch near the door and thought, very strange. Could I be in this phase? And did the power go out? I left the room, went into the hallway, walking towards the living room, but it was very dark, which would be normal if the power had gone out during the night. I was thinking about how this was all somewhat odd, but felt too real. I started to worry and tried calming myself down by thinking that if something really strange and or scary happened, I could be sure that I was in the phase and I shouldn't worry. Vaguely remember a weak yellowish greenish light starting to appear from the living room, but I did not see anything. Dmitry Markov from Moscow, Russia. My first time was the most terrible event in my life. I had never experienced such terror. It happened in December of 1990. I was sleeping in my bed at the time. Suddenly, I heard someone enter my room, but I did not pay attention to the intruder. The two female hands grabbed me from behind, and while pressing my belly, started to lift my body up. I distinctly felt thin fingers with long nails on my belly, but completely paralyzed and absolutely unable to move any part of my body or put up any kind of resistance. I felt my body go through the ceiling, but then was pulled still higher and higher. I got scared that this could be death. I was afraid not so much as death as of the unknown. All of this happened so swiftly that I found myself unprepared for such a crossover. I started to pray. I asked for God to help me free myself and go back. I panicked. I can't say how many seconds May forced levitation lasted or how high I was lifted above my house, but the moment came when I instantly returned to my bed. April L. Alston from Relay, USA. I had my first OBE experience by accident. After my morning workout at the gym, I felt exhausted and came home to my dorm for a nap. When I was awakened from the dream, I felt a tri-location of myself. I was aware I could feel my body lying on the bed. I also felt a third consciousness be an OBE to the real time zone. Whoa. I also felt third consciousness falling through the bed. My third one was what I believed to be an OBE to the real time zone. My energy body felt like it was separating from my physical body by falling through the bed. This happened by accident. I felt like I no longer had a body, but that I was a floating sphere of consciousness. I could sense things 360 degrees around me, but I couldn't see with my eyes because I had no eyes. I could perceive where things were around me, though I had an intense burning sensation in my head. And the more I tried to focus my awareness into the astral body, the more pain worsened. Eventually, I woke from the experience. I kept lying still and tried to re-enter the trance, but was unsuccessful. Tatiana Kiselyeva from Vancouver, Canada. That particular evening, I finally decided to deal with the outside noise that had ruined a few previous attempts and get myself a set of nice, bright orange earplugs. I plugged my ears and went to bed with the intention to wake up in the morning and practice the deferred method, also before going to bed. I read a few forum posts on Michael's website about people's first experiences. All of this led to the following. I woke up in the middle of the night because of very loud thump. I heard somewhere in the building. I was sitting in my bed thinking that the thump was merely just loud because I could hear it perfectly even with my ears being plugged. I decided to go to the front door and peek into the peephole in hopes of seeing what was going on. I heard the loud thump again. It sounded a bit scary. I lowered my feet to the floor and stood up and walked out my bedroom towards the front door. I could feel the cold floor with my bare feet. I was approaching the front door and could see the bright peephole in the darkness. It hit me. I am in the phase. I did not believe myself. I did not do any techniques. I thought, doubting. So I decided to test if it was indeed a phase. I lifted both of my feet up. That made me sitting in the air. Then I grabbed with my right hand the edge of a sliding door or a closet and pushed against the door with both legs. I flew backwards all the way to the other side of my living room, really surprised that I was still feeling my hand holding the closed door. My arm must have stretched like 10 feet. No deepening and no plan of action. I was floating right by my fireplace, seeing both of my feet in the air in my pajama pants, and I still did not believe that I was in the phase, so I decided to fly up. But I could not push against the floor because my feet were in the air, so I concluded that it's not the phase. Wrong logic. And I decided to go back to sleep. At that moment, I found myself sitting in my bed again, realizing that my plugged ears were bothering me tremendously, and so I took the plugs out. However, a second later, I realized that my ears were still plugged. I thought, that's weird. I just took the plugs out, didn't I? And that's when I realized I was lying in my bed and feeling my real ears. I jumped in excitement as I realized what had just happened. It was my first real out-of-body experience, but I was about 90% conscious. Otherwise, I would have clearly known that I was indeed out of body. I took a notepad, and as I was writing everything down, I vividly remembered the vibration that I felt before leaving the body. It was exactly as they had usually described, like being electrocuted without pain. Josiah Rachels from Bolivia, USA. I found myself struggling to fall into a full sleep with what felt like naps, and the last recognizable time occurring in reality was at 4:30 a.m. I had once again rested my head back down in what felt like almost immediately after doing so, the next thing I had recognized as an old comic shop I used to visit. Not remember staring at the ground and the field beneath my feet and questioning if I had been dreaming. I then tried jumping as high as I possibly could, which initiated a leap several feet high and long, curing the realization that I was in fact dreaming. Now, this is where things get a little broken, sequence-wise for me, so please bear with me. The thing I recall is being inside of the building I was heading towards in what I was told was a rehabilitation center. Everyone around me was dressed in white. None of the faces were completely recognizable except for two, a good friend of mine named Dan and a woman with no name. In the phase, I referred to her as the one I love, and even the woman's face blended back and forth between what I can only describe as a mix between Natalie Portman and one of my ex-girlfriends. I remember Dan leaning against the doorway next to me while I was staring into a mirror. I could see, but my hand kept touching my face as it was blurred. The only visible portion was my white clothes and hair as he began answering what I can only assume was my subconscious questions as to why I was there and for how long. I told him I could not remember how I got there or why I was there, and I remembered his response as clear as day. Dan, do you know why you're there, man? You're here, man? Me. I can't even tell you how I got here. Marijuana? Keep in mind I was in a rehab center. Dan, you can't remember. That's probably why you're in here in the first place. You're here for like a month, dude. Go check the schedule. At this point, I believe my subconscious began to panic about possibly becoming stuck. Because time in the phase seemed to begin to narrow, people began crowding me around the schedule. I remember specifically an African American man shouting beside me, "Who's Josh? Who's Josh?" Soon after leading me outward toward the front door where the one I love had been leaning, gesturing me to come closer. I then remember walking with the one I love when she began crying, begging me not to wake up, screaming that we could be happy here together if I stayed. During this tantrum, chains developed on her arms and legs, and I began to feel heavy. I then began thinking of my family, my mother specifically, and thoughts of getting stuck in a coma, which I do believe led to my subconscious conscious to panic further because time seemed to narrow even further. The one I loved then led me into a back room, and well, not to get vulgar, but we began having sex, and right before my orgasm, she started screaming at me not to go, at which point I felt myself being pulled away. In fact, I was being pulled away. Now, here's what really blew my mind about the whole experience. I then awoke to daylight and rushed out my room to find my mother, stepdad standing in the living room. I began explaining my experience to them. However, my stepdad began pre-guessing my whole experience dead on, which I questioned. I then took out my phone and noticed there was scratches and dents all over it. I handed my phone to my mom to look at the damages, and as she hit the backlight button, I woke up. I shot up almost immediately after opening my eyes. It was still dark outside. I looked at the time, 5:17 a.m.